CFB Paint. First full weekend of college football in the books. And it was an interesting one to say the least. I just before we started recording, I was at an event that required me to be in like a shirt and tie, and I almost kept it on with the joke like I'm gonna start applying for FSU's open job here because I can. If the requirement there is like, hey, all you got to do is get run over a bunch, not provide anything offensively either, and just have a great punter. I feel like I could manage a great punter if that's the only thing I have to do. So, a low bright spot for the Noles there, but lots to go around. We got a lot of marquee matchups, some cross-conference ones that had some intrigue. Corey, where do you want to go first?
Sunday night was my favorite night. It was a great game to watch. It was fun watching back and forth. Teams kind of played a little bit tougher than I expected on both sides, and we got to watch two quarterbacks that had kind of been waiting in the wings duel it out and see who came out on top. It was a fun one to watch for sure. And left me happy. I'm like, USC was tackling. I was stunned.
Yeah, that was the big thing. I think that I can't even remember who it was on Twitter that said something about like, oh, you should be worried because Lincoln Riley's got another one. And my response to that was like, I mean, we know he's great with quarterbacks. Like Miller Moss did great. Like I'm not taking anything away from his performance. To me, like the headline is USC may have a defense here, and that's a problem when you combine it with what Lincoln Riley can do offensively. That was a fun game.
I think that's a little far to take it. I don't know if USC has a defense, but they bend and break kind of thing. But they made their tackles like they weren't getting run over and beat atrociously. They weren't terrible blown assignments.
So. It was interesting. Like at the halfway, I think coming back from halftime, the broadcast group was like gushing over Nussmeier, and I was like, man, they're saying a lot for him having 13 points. I can't remember what it was. Like they're like, oh, he's doing great, and statistically, he was doing fine. But the points to me is like, that's the goal of all of this great offensive output is to score points, and they're not doing that. I mean, I think that's just that was a fun one. I think both teams, like you said, played really well out of the gate. Oftentimes in that first week, you see, some sloppiness and some lack of organization, and there's a little bit of that. A couple false starts here and there, but by and large, I thought that of the high-profile games, that one felt like it was for lack of better term, like the best played on both sides. If that makes sense. Where both teams, players are going to make plays, right, on both sides, but it just felt like they were pretty evenly matched, both with similar levels of like preparation and execution. So I guess the two that I would like compare it to kind of give like a big difference on like Georgia and Clemson, kind of first half maybe was a back and forth affair. Again, not a whole lot of scoring, but Georgia blows the game open in the second half. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, kind of that same thing where it was. I think it was a little bit more sloppy, but also maybe not quite as evenly matched. Where further on in the game, you started to see like, okay, A&M is hanging around here, but there's some concerns around quarterback that maybe puts a cap on that team.
Notre Dame was hurting themselves a lot in that game, and that's the reason A&M was still in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to go like conference by conference? Let's break it down.
Sure. Where do you want to start?
Let's go alphabetically. ACC is the first one. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. It starts with A.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, right? Yeah. Okay.
All right. You want my thought process, or you want to go first?
No, fire away.
Okay, we're starting with the absolute worst of the Power Four conferences, in my opinion. Easily the bottom four. Your big boys lose, and Clemson loses. Florida State loses again. Va Tech loses. NC State squeaks out a win.
Miami's the only one that looked good.
Yeah, exactly. You look like a genius calling Miami and saying you're all on them. Granted, it's one game. They played phenomenal to that, to what you'd expect the team to play like in their first week. They definitely played that way. And if they played that way for the rest of the year, I still think they'll win every single game. Like that Restrepo and Cam connection was very impressive to watch. They've that team's got some firepower, so I'm excited to watch and see what they do.
I think combining that with the fact that their schedule looks even easier now than heading into the season.
Pointing at you, Knowles. Yeah. Anyways,
looking at you, Knowles. Looking at you, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
We don't know what Louisville is. We'll see.
There's some weird things about it that they're like. There are weird, interesting highlights about this week that I felt like, and not to pile on to Max Johnson, but like him getting injured was help for North Carolina to some degree. They finally actually were able to start moving the ball, and I at one point in time I saw somebody was like, I can pass, I can throw a ball, and then tweeting that out because Max Johnson was playing so bad. I'm sorry for the kid who breaks his leg that we kind of pile on, but that was not a good performance and not a fun team to watch on that one. Another highlight of this next week is we don't have to talk about Florida State next week because they don't play. I mean, this conference, you had some opportunities to make statement wins, and you blew you look at every other conference, Big 12, Big 10, SEC, the big boys, for the most part, we're not going to sit there and talk every single game, blew out their minor opponents, and the ACC flirted with them and lost to half of them, so.
Yeah, no, it's very succinct, well done. I'll just put one more thing on the Noles here because that's, I think a lot of our listeners are aware we are Nole fans and are probably itching to hear, based on my own text messages post Labor Day. I think people are curious on my thoughts, and to me, it's like I don't know how many more times that can happen. I was going through their schedule, and I was like, yeah, UNC can probably run all over you. Cal might be able to run all over you. They got a really good back in Jaden Ott. Miami definitely will. Notre Dame definitely will. So there's 4 more. And we haven't talked about Florida, which is a maybe, right? Like, who knows? That's a maybe. SMU will spread you out and probably run out of a smaller box. It could get real ugly.
That linebacker core is struggling. Like, it's interesting to watch, listen to the specialists and also those that are watching practice. Everybody that comes out of practice says DJ did not look like this all fall practice. He actually managed the offense, looked pretty good. I don't feel like week 1 was his fault. Week 2, this was a contributing factor. The drops were a contributing factor. The practice reports this week, I don't know if you read any of the practice reports this week, were all awful, saying everything's not going well. Like, they're struggling. And so I kind of expected this to come in. I think I heard the line got moved up to 17.5 by the end of the week. And I was like, I thought it was a 10 at one point in time. And I thought that was even too big. So, I mean, it's just, there's some interesting thought processes in that this staff felt like there's some interesting theories. Bud Elliott says he thinks this staff felt like they had to reload in order to try to make the playoffs instead of just let their homegrown talent kind of have an okay season. They felt almost like the staff had pressure. There's talks that there's going to finally be some people not let go, but said, you know what, if you find another place, we're not going to stop you from going. And which, I mean, we haven't seen Norvell do that in 3 years. They have had the same staff. They're the longest continuous staff in college football. So, there's just some interesting things, and this team is in flux. But the other thing that's kind of interesting to me. Wow, I can't talk today. Is some of them people think that this is a 4-win team, and some people still think this is a bowl game team. And I'm like, I don't know where I stand on this one. I'm like, there's some people that think it's fixable, and some people that don't. And I'm just like, either way, it's been embarrassing. This team is a soft team, is what I'm learning. So,
yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say on it at this point. Like, again, anything's possible at this point. And at this point, if you wanted to just blanketly bet against FSU against the spread, you're probably going to make some money. So I didn't actually throw that on. Oh, I guess they don't play this week, but I just might just look at those numbers every week and think, yeah, I could see them not covering that. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting for them. Virginia Tech, I'm curious what happens. How do they pick up the pieces? What does Clemson look like going forward? Well, and it's a disaster for the league.
Kyron Drones, how serious is that injury? Because do they win that game if he isn't injured and he gets to play in the fourth or in the overtime? Maybe. They came back
Yeah.
down. They were down 20-3 or something like that, and came all the way back to tie the game. Vanderbilt misses a field goal to win the game, and then and in the end of the fourth quarter, you don't have Kyron. So
Yeah.
yeah,
We'll see. I don't know the extent of that injury. Do you know if that's
they
like
haven't
a
reported
short
it.
term?
So
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one. Should we move on? I don't know if there's anything else from the conference we really wanted to cover. You're right. Some of the favorites in it got demolished, and others squeaked by, and now it looks like there's a very clear front runner. Um,
it's the only team that like handle business minus Louisville, essentially.
yeah, and Louisville's to me like okay. Austin P has been rated via the portal over the last couple of years. They actually had a pretty good squad, I think, 2 years ago, and slowly but surely, all of those, all the top players of that have filtered their way up to higher levels of the sport. But
Yeah,
yeah, like Miami looks far and away. Like if you're gonna pick myths, which this is, like I think a lot of times Cam Moore got bailed out by some pretty amazing catches when he threw the ball behind players, like 4 or 5 times. But I also think like, hey, they've worked on that all summer. He probably knows what those receivers are capable of, and that's what he's willing to give them a chance at it. He trusts them and put it where they can catch it. So yeah, I think that they are looking extremely good for at least for the ACC championship. I know it's early. We'll see what happens. Things can change. But a lot of the things that I think you could fix on different teams, I'm not sure are fixable. Like, right, the things that you would think like, oh, if this was different, we'd play better. I just don't know if those are changing.
yeah. Like with Florida State, you either have that dog or you don't. Sometimes, like, doesn't seem like they do with Tech. What do you do with a quarterback that's potentially injured? With even with NC State, like, can you get that? That one might be an interesting thing. Can they get that squared away? Can they fix that? Because that's potential there.
Yeah, perhaps. I'm sure there's some nerves there. We watched. I think we jumped back and forth between that game and a few others. That was Thursday night, right? I think, if memory serves. It's all a
The
blur at this point, but
NC State game,
um,
yeah, it was Thursday night.
yeah. So we were watching some of that. They had some bright spots in that game. At different times, the defense looked really sharp, and other times it was giving up yards and points. Um, so maybe there's something there. To me, again, just sorry, one more thought on Florida State. As you said, I was thinking like you put on film against Georgia Tech that someone can run all over you. Now you've put it on film twice. At some point, like, all right, you didn't if you didn't like film review after the first game, the next week was a chance to do something about it. Yeah, you either got that dog or you don't. I don't think they do. Like, I'll say it. I don't think they do. It's a problem. Uh, so yeah, should we move on to the Big 12
Yeah, why don't you give us your thoughts first?
of the Big 12?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Welcome back, Cam Rising. I think is the first thing. They looked very sharp. Kind of, nothing too grand to write home about. I still feel. I think I chose them to win the league, right? I'm forgetting what I
I believe
actually
so.
officially did. I believe so. I want to say that again. I drafted them. I'm all in on their ability to potentially win all of their games. Um, I think that they're looking good. I have not got eyes on the Kansas State Wildcats just yet. So I need to see. I know that result looked on paper tighter than I would have expected. I don't know anything that contributed to that. So, uh, hat tip to Oklahoma State taking care of business against South Dakota State. I think that was a sneaky potential upset, versus a really good FCS team, and kind of early in the season, which Oklahoma State seems fond of dropping at least one or two early season games. Uh, Arizona, did you see that game or catch any of it? Um,
Let up 39 points to New Mexico.
yeah, the defense is gonna be interesting. And maybe it's just the first. I don't want to overreact. Um, but the defense, which I actually thought would be pretty solid. I like what they returned at linebacker. I like that they got Takario Williams, I think is his last name. Takario Davis, to come back, a defensive back who was considering following the coaching staff up to Washington, following Jed Fish. He opted to stay. T-Mac is going to bail. That's the like kind of the cheat code, and he had a heck of a game as he's wont to do. But that one's one to worth monitoring. If they can't stop people, there's going to be some losses there. I think we all expected that, but I don't think we expected such a tight game against New Mexico, who, by the way, looks game like.
Yeah, maybe New Mexico is better than we thought they were going to be because they lost last week, right? But they played a much better game than people expected them to play.
So. Yeah. I am very intrigued to see what they do going forward. Just because I think that their quarterback is a pretty special player, and Bronco is a good motivator. I think at this point, if that team is realistic, like, hey, look, we weren't expected to win either of these last two games, and we've been in them basically till the end. There was a little Arizona pulled away a little bit in the second half there, but they were in that fight for a good while. And I think Broncos one that can keep a team in the fight throughout a season, not just a game. So I am interested to see what they do going forward. But so Arizona, maybe a little bit of a question mark there. Who else did I want to hit? Colorado, I think, is kind of what I expected them to be. I don't know if we really talked about them a lot preseason. I think they're like a 7-5 team. I think they're a good team, not a great team. They've got some flaws that you can exploit. I am very intrigued to see them play Nebraska this week because Nebraska has an offense apparently, and I'm just very intrigued to see how that travels in the Sea of Red. So that one's a fun one. We'll talk through week 2 matchups in just a bit, but I think that pretty much covers it. BYU, I think, is better than they're supposed to be, like just a little. I mean,
a little bit, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So, you ready for me?
Sorry. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
No, you're good. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. For me, I liked watching that Colorado game. I immediately regret not picking Travis Hunter as my Heisman winner. Like they are not going to win the championship, but he is the best player right now in college football, in my opinion, potentially. Like, there are better quarterbacks and stuff like that, but like, good heavens, some of the snags he had in that game, he just played incredible. Granted, it's not like it's the first game of the year that you're the most fresh you're going to be, but I think there's some chance that he could make a run at the Heisman for sure.
I think you make a good point, actually. Yeah, I think they're going to be in enough games this year. I think, going 4-8, or was it 4-8 last year that they did? Like, again, I think they're ahead of schedule last year. Like they beat their preseason win total expectations. If they're in enough games this year, you're gonna see a finalist there. I think between him and Shedeur, just because of the name recognition. I'm betting it's Hunter because I frankly think Hunter's better and a lot better than Shedeur.
And the commentary that was like going on Twitter, et cetera, during the game kind of brought back that Charles Woodson-esque like feel when everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, he can do it on offense and he can do it on defense." Now all they need to do is stick him as a punt returner, and he is Charles Woodson, to some degree. Like,
there you go. Yeah, I'm sure he'd be good at that. I don't know if he's ever actually returned kicks or punts in his college career, but
yeah,
I'm sure he's a killer athlete. So,
my other thoughts about the Big 12, you didn't win the one chance you had a statement chance that you had. Wow, you didn't win the one game that you had a chance to make a statement against Penn State. You weren't expected to win it. I think you played okay, but I wouldn't say great, which kind of is a little sad for you. I think all the other conferences had a chance to make better statements than you did, but that was your one chance to make a good statement. The only thing that you also didn't do is you had Texas Tech go down to the wire against. I don't even remember how you say this name, Abilene Christian. I went and watched
Abilene.
I went and watched the highlights of this game. I was like, wait, what? And they lose or they win on a missed 2-point conversion. Like, that's got to be terrifying for you as a Texas Tech fan. I know you are. But like, you had some teams that did okay. Nothing to write home about to me. Like you said, maybe BYU's better. I'm excited to see what happens when the schedule starts to ramp up. I mean, you took care of business against teams, but you didn't blow them out like everybody else did. So that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah, and like you said, not only last week, but spinning forward, there are pretty limited opportunities. And I think we talked about this in our preseason. Maybe we didn't, but maybe we talked about it offline. But just there's limited opportunities for the Big 12 to really show how it measures versus other leagues, like especially when it comes to like their premier programs, right? At least the expected favorites this year. So you have uh, Oklahoma State playing Arkansas this week.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Who score
Arkansas
every
is
drive?
yeah, but at the same time, like Arkansas is not expected to do a whole lot in the SEC, and
Right.
their coach is near the top of most hot seat lists that you'll look at. So it's like a win there doesn't do much for you. Maybe a win by a really substantial margin raises an eyebrow or two, or calls some attention to you. Utah's non-conference game against Big 12 Baylor is this week, if you'll remember that. So again, another opportunity. Cincinnati playing Pittsburgh, Kansas State going on the road at Tulane, I guess is like your best real option. BYU plays SMU Friday night. I guess Colorado and Nebraska maybe is probably your best one as I scroll through the schedule here. Um, so yeah, that's the one thing that I think is going to really hurt the Big 12 this year. If you want to like really look ahead to like playoff time, like there's just not a whole lot of opportunities for them to show how they stack against other leagues, which I think is going to end up being a problem uh, if you don't have a couple of teams that separate themselves from the pack in the conference.
Right.
Big Ten football. Um, I think. Well, actually, I got started last on Big 12. Go ahead. Any big reactions for the Big Ten?
So I feel like it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I'm gonna go with bad things that I saw. Oregon kind of flirted with Idaho. I mean, you had the stats that you had, but you couldn't put in the points. Michigan flirts with Fresno State. Um, Ohio State kind of waits to the second half to kick it in gear, but in the end they win. The good things are Iowa scores 40 points in the game. They have
Oh,
receivers catch 3 touchdown passes in the second half, which equals their total from last year of total touchdowns caught by wide receivers. So I
ow.
mean, like
Progress.
that's a when I saw that stat, I was like, that is a pretty awesome stat. And then Penn State threw the ball downfield and looked to be an aggressor. That looks like something that's exciting about this conference. Dylan Raiola, let's just say that like he looks legit. He looks like he's confident and competent. And where can Nebraska go with that? Because I mean, who did they have last year? Jeff Sims. Good heavens.
Yeah, Jeff Sims, and I can't remember the other. I'm forgetting the other player's name. Both were turnover machines, but
Yeah, and then
um,
the other thing is USC can tackle and make a team earn it against them, and LSU didn't earn it against them. So, like overall, the Big 12 or the Big 10 seemed to have handled business. You had some blowouts, but you had some people that flirted with a little bit of disaster. I'm interested to see the games next week. I'm excited about Texas, Michigan, and to see where these two teams stack up, or these two conferences stack up. I do think, though, far and away, it looks like the Big Ten and SEC have set themselves up as the Big Two, or hoping to be the Big Two, and they looked like the Big Two this week. It was better competition, better players. Period.
hard to argue with that. I'm right there with you. I think the only other thing I really would add is SC being competent defensively is a game changer. So again, we'll want to see that play out over multiple weeks. But if that's not a flash in the pan, they become pretty dangerous pretty quickly. And so that's exciting. Uh, I have not even taken. I said this before we started recording. I haven't even watched a single play of the Oregon Idaho game. I don't know how that happened, so I'll need to go look through that. But I refreshed it a couple times, and I was like, oh my goodness! And my wife was like, what's going on? And I was like, this has to be a mistake. I refreshed it a few more times. She's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, it's a 3-point game versus Idaho. And Oregon is just like what's happening. And then I looked at the stats and I was like, oh, I mean, I don't. I don't see anything that's like jumping out. It weren't like they didn't turn out the ball over 8 times or anything like crazy to like keep the score so low. I did see that they, at that point in the game, I can't remember exactly how deep. I want to say we were in like the third quarter, maybe beginning of the fourth. But they sorry, I lost my train of thought with that cough. What was I going to say? Yeah, but yeah, like I guess they'd missed a couple of fourth down conversions, but like, I don't know. That one's surprising. I'm not hitting the panic button on that yet. I think everyone's allowed to have like one kind of shaky performance, especially early in the season. Um, and 2 or 3 before it becomes a pattern. In some cases with FSU, it's such a glaring pattern. Like 2's plenty of evidence, but I'm giving Oregon the benefit of the doubt there. Ohio State, yeah, again, didn't have eyes on that game. Just kind of paid attention to it. I think that, shook off a little bit of rust, pulled away late. Um, yeah, Penn State and USC, I think, are the ones that really grab the headlines for me. That's exciting that you have a couple of other potential contenders. I think that, heading into the season, us along with what seemed like most of the country was like, it's Ohio State or it's Oregon. It's one of those two. And it's like, oh, well, maybe, just maybe, there's a couple of other teams that can throw their hat in the ring. And again, if they can continue that type of performance that we saw in week 1, really make a run at it.
Yeah, I think what you're gonna see is like their top tier is probably in comparison with the SEC's top tier, maybe not pound for pound, but I think the depth is where they're gonna get beat. I mean UCLA goes to Hawaii and wins by 3. Northwestern wins by 7 against Miami of Ohio. Even Indiana, they won 31-7, but like it's kind of closer than you'd expect a quality team to be with. Whereas if you go to the SEC, we'll talk about it in a little while, but good heavens.
Yeah, yeah. I That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to spend a ton of time on Indiana, but I'm a buyer. Like,
Oh yeah,
I think Signetti's gonna do some things there. He's gonna do some pretty special things there. So, um, not this year. I think they're probably a bowl team this year. But if
yeah.
you are a Hoosiers fan, which there's probably not that many Hoosiers football fans out there,
You're
but
buying stock. Yeah, agreed.
yeah, yeah. I felt that way from the time he was hired, and nothing I saw. I mean, I know, yeah, there was maybe some struggles there, but like, it's Indiana football winning by what, 24 points? Like,
Yeah, 31-7.
that doesn't happen that often. So, and especially in a debut. So, I think that Hoosier fans should be excited. I think they got a good one. SEC, I think it's my turn to go first,
Yeah, go
right?
ahead.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, like in the non-conference matchups that were like on somewhat level playing ground, this was kind of interesting because you had A&M lose to Notre Dame, which A&M was actually favored in the game going into the game.
Yeah, but everybody thought Connor Wegman was going to be an okay quarterback. Did you watch? Oh, who's the old Georgia guy?
Aaron Murray.
Oh, was it? No, it wasn't Aaron Murray. He played. Oh, Pollock was like Connor Wegman is so good. You're going to write this down, blah blah blah, and he did not look good at all. So
Okay, the reason I said Aaron Murray is because he sometimes breaks down game. Like he's a good follow.
gotcha.
But yeah, did you say quarterback or no? Because
Yeah.
Pollock played defensive line, didn't
No, I
he?
said
Yeah.
defense. Or I said he's saying Connor Wegman would be such a good quarterback.
Oh, got it. Sorry, I was like, okay, maybe I'm mistaken there. But yeah, we'll see on that. Again, I think I think it was Bud Elliott who tweeted out like, yeah, DJ Lagway will be starting at Texas A&M next year. I think he's mostly joking, but it's like, oh, that's an intriguing thought, because he was the one bright spot for UF really against Miami, and A&M, like, they looked pretty good. I mean, again, like, there was, like you said, there's some misfires on Notre Dame's end that kind of helped keep that game closer than I think it really was. But like there's talent to work with there. I think Elko's, it's his opening game. But again, A&M loses in a game that they're favored in. LSU loses in a game that they're favored in. Um, Clemson handles business, carries the way to the conference. And then Florida, I mean,
Beat
you
Georgia.
could kind of say, oh, sorry, who did I say Clemson?
Yeah,
Sorry.
they handled
No.
Clemson.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Georgia handles Clemson, take care of business. Again, we'll always kind of carry weight and carry more than their fair share of weight for the conference. But Florida at home versus Miami in a game that the kind of odds makers had that as like a 2.5 point spread in favor of Miami. I think Miami could I two things on that game. I guess I probably should have covered this in our ACC spot, but like I love that they did like a trick play to try and throw another touchdown while they were up by whatever, like 41. Like there was two or three things that I was like, okay, maybe the U might actually be back. And by actually back, I mean like beating teams and then like doing the kind of nonsense that the U is kind of known for.
Well,
That
did you
part, and
see
then
Mario?
well, I saw that. Like that to me is like, all right, whatever. Like you could say what winners get to say what they want, so I'm good with that. What I'm talking about is just like the antics that Miami, like like dancing and rubbing it in and all that. My part, did you see their players like walk up to the recruit sections and say like, hey, don't go here,
Yeah,
don't go here? They're all going like, man, you want to win, you got to come to Miami. And it's just like that felt like, oh, yep, that sounds like growing up. That's like that sounds like something that the 2001 Canes would have absolutely done. Like and based on, again, it's before my time, but watching like the U documentary, the 30 for 30, like they clearly did that in the 80s as well. Like so that part was pretty impressive. But again, of the marquee matchups that the SEC was in, they went 1-3, and people aren't talking about that. They're mostly talking about, oh well, Mizzou put up what 60 points and Arkansas put up 70 points uh, and Alabama beat I can't Western Kentucky, what 60 something to nothing, and like yeah, and those are all great, but all the actual games against opponents with comparable firepower, in some cases maybe more. I'd argue that that Miami, Florida, like you're talking about, a top three ACC team versus a a bottom five or so SEC team in Florida. Like, okay, that one maybe is a little bit mismatched. So even if you throw that one out, they're 1-2 in the other three, which is to me a little bit problematic. And so I think this next week becomes really important when Texas travels to Michigan, for example. And is Bama at Wisconsin this week? I can't remember exactly when that game's being played.
let's see. Bama plays. They play South Florida.
South Florida. Okay, so all right. I think it must
Although they
be
do need to
week.
make a statement in that game too. So
They will. It's kind of the short answer there. But yeah, I think I don't know. The SEC to me was more of a mixed bag. I agree with you. I think that like top to bottom, they do look like the deepest league, and that to me is not earth shattering information. Um, but in some of their gotta have it games, they didn't really have it. I don't know if that will necessarily like weigh in unless there's kind of a continued trend of that. But yeah, something worth monitoring. Let's put it that way.
I would say on the other side, the teams that played competition that they were supposed to beat smashed competition that were supposed to beat.
Yes.
Of the 16 games this week, 10 of them the SEC outscored their opponents or held their opponents to 3 or lesser points. Like that's
Wow.
insane.
That's true.
Depending on like regardless of who you play, that's an impressive point. And especially in this day and age where people are like, oh, we'll put in the second stringers and the third stringers and let you guys kind of get back in the game sometimes. And then on top of that, you had like the Kentucky game that only went 3 quarters ish, or like 2.5 quarters ish. They ended it like 10 minutes left in the third quarter because of lightning delays. You have the game. Which one was it? I think was it Ole Miss or Auburn? Oh, I think it was Auburn. It goes to 10-minute quarters in the second half. Like
Yeah.
you're paying these people. Like part of me wouldn't agree to that because I want to get my players the reps, but whatever. You're beating the teams that you're supposed to beat. I think you have a good argument here that they didn't beat teams that they were playing on an even playing field to some degree. Connor Wegman struggled against Notre Dame. He had 3.3 yards per attempt in passing yards. That's insane. Like you might as well
Yeah.
run the ball every time. Like What's the point in throwing the ball? Minus to keep balance, And then SC pulling out that win. Brian Kelly, he got to be frustrated with how that team played. His little antics after the press conference, whether they were staged or not staged. I think some people think that they're staged. Like saying,
it sure felt forced. I don't know about
like,
staged, but like it's
I'm
like
planning on blowing up at some point in time. That's what it kind of felt like.
yeah. I mean, it just like I mean, I don't know.
But
It's great to show some passion in the presser, but like I mean, he turned his normal purple, but he wasn't yelling and screaming. I think he was just low on oxygen. Uh,
well, Vegas will do that to you. It's so high up in the air. Sarcasm, of course. But I don't know. This is our first week with the SEC to see like they did handle business on some and they didn't on others. I think the next few weeks will be telling. I don't know if I think the Texas Michigan will be as telling as you think it will be. Um, I think. Texas
I mean, by telling what I mean is like that one matters to the SEC. I think. I think if Michigan wins that game, and I'm not picking them to win that game, but if they do, like, where is outside of the Clemson win, like they don't have a whole lot to hang their hat on in out of conference play to this point.
Yeah.
Now, again, they still have a few more opportunities, and no one's. I think this is like how, what it would end up affecting is like how many teams they can get in, right? Like I think the number is somewhere between 3 and 5 probably.
Well, the ACC's letting Notre Dame in for sure. So
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. The ACC looks like a one bid league by a mile right now. Notre Dame, I think, at a glance, their schedule they're going to be in, right?
Yeah,
Like
I
they're
mean, you
going to
can lose
be
two
in at
games
this
and still
point.
probably get in.
Mm-hmm. And you won one of the big ones right there. So USC. I mean, Florida State. I don't know if you can even really count that as like a tough game. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I don't remember the rest of their schedule. I think there's one or two other opponents that I'm like, maybe those ones are a challenge.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm excited to see this. I do think it's becoming a propaganda machine a little bit. It's like, oh, we blew out all these teams, and then
oh my goodness, yes. I think the facade is over on both sides, right? You have like Fox really touting the USC win, and then you have the ESPN was like, "Hey, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Don't worry about us losing 3 of the 4 big ones. I need you to look at us beat up on all these little tiny guys. Look at how bad we beat these teams."
Yeah.
Like, okay,
but
all right.
it is true. They beat them bad, and the Big Ten didn't do that. So.
And that's true. That's fine. Yeah. And I would just say like, hey, our biggest names are yet to play their marquee out of conference games. So, and there's again, looking at it from that perspective, I can't even remember who the Big Ten plays all out of conference. Of course, Texas and Michigan. To take a page out of Paul Feinbaum's book, if Texas wins that, you're gonna be like, all right, so you beat like a top 5 or 6 Big Ten opponent, which is what he said after USC beat LSU. It's like, oh, really? Now they're top 6. Like preseason, they were not top 6; they were top 4, top 3 even for some. But so I think that's one where it'll be interesting to see the narratives coming out of that game, especially if Michigan wins that game. Like the SEC to this point doesn't have a whole lot to hang their hat on in out of conference play with the real other, within the Power 4, but more specifically Power 2, right?
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to cover from week 2 or from week 1 rather before we jump ahead to week 2?
No, let's jump ahead to week 2.
All right. We did not discuss this pre-show, so we're gonna kind of just roll through this. I feel like we kind of touched on that Texas Michigan game. Do you have anything else to add on that?
I'm excited for that one. I'm really, really excited for that one. I do not think this Michigan team is that good. Like, maybe a top 25 team, but not a top 10 team.
I just think they're a fascinating study in how much can you win with defense, right? Like, So I'll be interested to watch it for that. Also, just like the changes in styles is fascinating. Like, I mean, Texas, if they get a lead, or if this is a 10-point game in the second half and Texas has to salt away the game with running the football, can they do it? I don't know. I don't know if they can. So
I wouldn't. I would just keep throwing it on them. I wouldn't salt it away. I'd be like, hey, I scored on you throwing. Well, I'm going to continue throwing on the ball.
well, yeah, I'm just saying, but like a 10-point lead could still be 13-3, and it's like, all right, like there's still like one or two like just blown coverages or a broken tackle away from this game being turned on its head. So I don't know. That's an interesting one. Again, the spread right now is what, 7.5, and the total is like 42.5.
Yeah, I saw
So
43 is what I saw on DraftKings.
43. Okay, I'm just going off of ESPN right here. I don't have, so that's the ESPN bet. Whoever they licensed out the ESPN bet name to. I can't even remember what sportsbook it is. So I don't take it for much. It's just mostly for conversation, right? Like, I don't know. That one's fascinating. Yeah, I think that one's a game that it features an interesting, change of or contrast of styles, and we'll see who wins that. Michigan being at home, a fair amount of travel for Texas. Um, I don't know exactly how long that plane ride is. It's got to be what, 3.5 hours,
Yeah,
maybe something like that. Basically,
I mean,
all the way
I
up
fly
to north.
this week, it's 3 hours. So from us.
So maybe it's a little bit shorter because it's more of a direct shot rather than like across the country. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. Couple of others that I had my eyes on for ones that I just kind of want to keep track of. Um, Iowa State, Iowa, the Cyhawk. Always a good one. Iowa's at home. I got more on this game later. uh, a couple of others. Auburn versus Cal. This was a close game last year. In fact, you could argue that Cal probably should have won. Again, year one in Hugh Freeze. He's got a lot more pieces in place. This is more just a measuring stick game. I expect Auburn to win. The question to me is by how much? Like, how much more organized are they? They've got some receiver talent that they feel really good about. Let's see how it stacks up against Cal, who normally has a pretty good defense. Again, I think, um, gosh, I can see his face, but I'm not remembering his name. What is their head coach's name? Do you remember it? I'm blanking on it right now. Yeah, Justin Wilcox. There it is. Um, yeah, Justin Wilcox, good defensive mind. So it'll at least be interesting from that. I don't know if they can match up athletically with some of the weapons that Auburn has. What are the other big matchups this week? I'm just really starting to take a glance at this. Others that you're looking into, I'll pass the baton to you while I
Utah Baylor
scan this.
looks fun to me.
Non-conference game.
Yeah. The other one, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, like with Georgia Tech, the way Georgia Tech's played so far, and also with Syracuse with a new head coach, I'm interested to see how, and with Cade McNown, I'm interested to see how that game goes and see what happens. I'm surprised that Georgia Tech is favored by 3, but that one's
meaning that you're surprised that they're favored, or they're favored by that's too much, too little.
I honestly think. I don't know where I don't know where I would put the line on that. Like, I could see it going either way, and so it's just surprising that like that's where they ended up. To me, I guess is more what it is. Because I don't know if I fully buy into who Georgia Tech is, and I also don't know what to make of Syracuse yet. And so it's like it kind of seems like one of those games like I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because could see it going wherever.
Yeah.
Partially why I find it interesting is because I can see it going wherever, and I'm interested to see what information I glean from it. So
I hear that. I wonder what ends up happening there. I lean Georgia Tech on that one, but you're right. Like Syracuse, first game, so you could argue like week one jitters and new coaching staff, and what do they look like now that they've have a little bit of information on how they play as a team. So yeah, interested to see that again. I'm pretty high longer term on Syracuse and gosh, Fran Brown. Like, I think that they've got a good coaching staff in place. To me, I think the ACC is like like where was this 5, 6, 7 years ago from Syracuse and from Georgia Tech, um, from some of these other groups that are starting to show some signs of life. It feels like a little too late,
They were playing
for
by the
them.
rules and not
Miami,
paying players. That's what the problem was.
I guess Miami's not known for keeping the rules though,
I'm
and
saying, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
Um,
anyway,
Other
a couple of
games,
others. Yeah, go,
Tennessee,
go, go.
NC State. Um, is NC State going to struggle as bad as they did last week, or are they going to show up and this is actually a good game? Because
Do you think that they prepped like maybe a little extra for Tennessee, and that's what showed up in week one?
no, I just think that would be worse,
They're just not that good. All right, that's fair.
or just
I
not as
just like
coordinated. Like needed some practice, I guess.
all right. I just like part of me like thinks like all right, maybe they repped a little bit extra of like what Tennessee runs and trying to get ready for that. Um, I, Again, I think this isn't an official pick for me. I think Tennessee will cover. What is it at 8.5 now, or eight?
Yes,
8.5, somewhere in there. I think Tennessee's covering that. I'm high on the Vols. You know that already, but yeah, I mean that's an opportunity game for the ACC and one of few remaining. So got to take advantage of it. We talked about Colorado, Nebraska. I don't know if you had more thoughts on that game.
um, I just thought it was interesting that Dion's playing nice with Matt Rule to start the week off. So
Is he? I
uh, he's been
haven't been plugged in.
he was just like, oh yeah, I respect Matt Rule, and I was like, oh, that's kind of not the vibe you guys have been putting off against each other.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a different tune. Not just for Dion. I think Matt Rule was the one who first poked the bear last year, where he was like, some other teams basically said everyone can get out, and I was like, I'm working with the guys that I got, and I was like, oh, like you
Yeah,
went out of your way on that one, like, and then yeah, then you go and turn the ball over a million times and lose the game, even though your defense played lights out. Um, yeah, so that one's interesting just because yeah, how it played out last year. Colorado obviously gets a lot of eyeballs, but excited to see you have a quarterback duel, or you could have a quarterback duel in this game, and so that'll be fun to watch. I'm very intrigued by that game as well. Um, Oregon, Boise State.
exactly the one I had my eye on as well. I love that it's like a late night kickoff too.
Hate that it's on Peacock. What the heck?
I'm gonna go find a way to see it. I don't care. I'm not paying extra for Peacock. I'm gonna go find a way to pirate that thing.
All right. Do we need to edit that out before you admit to a crime? It's parody. It's a joke.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm right there with you. I think uh, Boise State obviously has a premier running back. Oregon State has a pretty ferocious defensive line. Um, so it will be, yeah. I mean, how much can Ashton Jeanty? How far can he carry Boise State? And what else can they do to give some support and try and keep up. Again, I expect Oregon's offense to bounce back. I don't think that's you see like Vegas isn't overreacting again. The point total again, according to ESPN Bet, which I have right in front of me, 61.5. So they're expecting a bounce back offensively, and of course Oregon is favored by 19.5 points.
What was that,
So
like
they're
that's a 40-20 win essentially.
yeah, something in that ballpark, right? So they think that was a blip on the radar. They're not panicking. I'm not panicking about Oregon's offense either. Um, there was another one that I scrolled past that I forgot I wanted to just touch on really quickly. Sorry, I know this is a little bit bad radio here, but um,
Florida and Sanford. Does Florida actually get another win? Get a win?
Florida will win that one, I think. Oh yeah, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but Oklahoma State, Arkansas, that just feels like a must-win game for the Big 12. Like if you want some sort of outside shot at getting two teams in, you can't have any mess ups in your out of conferences. It's a pretty limited slate. Um, I think that pretty much covers it from like games that I wanted to like specifically highlight. Do you have any others that you wanted to call to our attention here?
the only other game I'm interested to see, and I expect Miami to blow them out, but Miami, Florida, and A&M. Florida A&M won the HBC championship last year. They're ranked 25th in the FCS. Like they've won their first two games, but it's like 24-23, 22-18. And like, I want to see how good is this team? Is this team going to actually like put up a few points, or are they going to get blown out again like they did last year from Miami?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean,
I only have a particular interest in there because we grew up in Tallahassee, so we're Florida A&M fans to some degree. So
we're Rattlers. We strike them. But yeah, we'll see. Again, they beat Norfolk State by 1 point, and then last week Norfolk State lost 42-3 to. Oh gosh, now I'm blanking on who they played. Norfolk State played East Carolina, so I think that will be over
it
quickly.
should be a
But yeah,
blowout, but I'd love to see the Rattlers kind of do something.
of course, yeah, make some noise. Um, All right, yeah. So I think with that we can transition. We can talk through our picks. Maybe we first quickly review how the season has gone thus far. I can give kind of. Do you want to give? I can give the overall update. We didn't really do this after week 0 because there was so little on the board.
Yeah.
But week 0, I chose Georgia Tech plus 12.5 versus FSU. Of course, that hit. And then I chose the under 48.5 total points, and that also hit. You chose FSU to cover. So 0-1 for you in week 0, 2-0 for me. Week 1, a little bit different. I went Virginia Tech minus 13.5 at Vanderbilt. No, Vandy won outright. Miami minus 2.5 at UF. The more I say, like that would be one that, again, never giving actual gambling advice, but like that one's one I felt really confident in that you could probably put a lot of money on, and you have a really good chance of bringing it home, and you did. Boise State, Georgia Southern. I had 2 plays in this game. One hit. Georgia Southern was within the 13.5. But there was no tackling in this game on really either side. So the point total under 58.5. Again, I think I saw like the process of this game playing out correctly in terms of like both teams are going to run the ball. If teams tackle and you're not averaging in Boise State's case 10.5 yards a carry, that was their average on the game. But with the lack of tackling, Boise State nearly covered the total by themselves. They scored 56 points. The total for both teams was 58.5, so that did not hit. And then finally, I said USC LSU over 64 total points. Again, like you said, teams tackled, which who knew? And I think we said earlier, yeah, like 4 trips to the red zone. That I think in those 4 trips that I'm talking about, I think there were more trips to the red zone, of course, but in those you only had like 3 points come of them. So a couple of 4th down stops, some missed field goals, really sunk the chances of that. Turning the page to you in week 1, I should say, brighter story for you. Iowa minus 22 over Illinois State. Nailed that one. Well done, sir. Tip my cap to you. Penn State minus 8 at West Virginia. Same story. Went on the road. No problems for the Nittany Lions. The surprising one. This is the one I felt like most confident in of your picks too. I was like, yeah, I think that probably makes sense. Oregon minus 43.5 versus Idaho, and we don't know what happened there.
What was it, like 9 that they ended up winning
yeah.
by?
Yeah, I think that's what it ended up being. Wild. All right. Do you want to go ahead and give yours, or do you want me to give mine?
Go ahead first.
All right. I have a lot this go around here. And I'm trying to decide, do I actually want to make all of these official plays or not? All right. But I'll just go. Let's see. I count 8. So we'll see what happens. We're going all in here. Okay. Duke on the road at Northwestern. You're getting 2.5 points versus Northwestern. I like it. Give me the Blue Devils. I feel like they will cover that spread. So I don't feel great about Northwestern. I don't feel great about Duke either. But I think between the two, I feel better about Duke. So give me Duke to cover the 2.5 point spread. They're road dogs, but not by a ton. I told you on the Cy-Hawk Trophy, I have Iowa minus 3. They're going to cover that versus Iowa State. I think that's actually down to 2.5, so I'll take the extra half point. That's almost just like an auto play to me, where it's like essentially a pick 'em. 2.5. Like that's within a field goal. It's essentially a pick 'em. Iowa's at home. More offensive output. Give me Iowa. Mizzou minus 34.5 versus Buffalo. I expect them to blow out. We talked about the SEC teams blowing out all their uh, all their middling foes. That's going to continue. Ole Miss minus 41 versus Middle Tennessee State. Same principle. Um, Old Dominion playing South Carolina tough last week. Now they're home dogs to East Carolina. Give me them to cover the 2.5 point spread. They are 2.5 point dogs at home. They're going to cover it. Same principle here. Nevada +1 hosting Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern has to go all the way across the country. Nevada's been game in their two games thus far. I got them. I think they win the game outright. It's essentially pick them at +1. And then finally, again, bounce back expected. Oregon minus 19.5 versus Boise State. They close up. They right the ship. They silence the doubters and get ready to kind of shift focus as they start moving into conference play.
All right, that's quite a bit. I think I'm going to try and limit myself to 3 again. I just have to pick which 3 because I've got a few thought processes. I'm going to go Texas beats Michigan by over 7.5. I think this Texas team is legit. I think this Michigan team is going to struggle to score against the team. The line is at 43, so that means that they expect a 24 to 16 kind of game, or maybe 27 to something like that. I can't do my math off the top of my head. I think this is more like a 31-14, 31-17 kind of game. I think that line's about right because that puts it at about 45. But I think the spread is not right. So give me Texas to cover the 7.5. I, like you, am an Iowa believer. I'm just going to ride this Iowa train for a little bit. Give me
Love
Iowa
it.
to beat Iowa State, minus 2.5. Like you, I said, take the extra half point. You can give me Iowa by 7, and I take it no problem.
Wow.
My next one is I've got so many. I looked at that Ole Miss Middle Tennessee game. I don't know, there's no way they don't cover. But just because that's an easy pick, I'm not going to make that my pick. I think you're right on that. Give me Tennessee to beat NC State by -8 to cover that spread. I think it's going to be a 2 or 3 touchdown game, to be honest.
I like that one. I think I said that earlier. Like not an official play for me, but I think that's it. I also technically had Auburn and Cal, like Auburn covering versus Cal. I think I just skipped over it. So Auburn minus 12.5 versus Cal.
Yeah. I also looked at the Utah Baylor line, and that one at 14.5. I'm like, I can see Utah.
Which way are you leaning on that?
Oh, definitely Utah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I would think too. But
I'm not making that official. So just the 3. Texas versus Michigan, or they cover the 7.5. Iowa covers the 2.5 against Iowa State, and Tennessee covers the 8 versus NC State.
I like it. All right. Anything else before we wrap up? We're doing much better keeping these like to an hour. It's funny how like 2 opinions versus 4. How much shorter we can keep this.
It's also a lot more boring. You and I are not the entertainment.
Yeah, the personality is gone. We miss you, Mark. We miss you, Bri. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll wrap up. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you after week 2. Getting a little bit more active on the social channels, so feel free to check them out and enjoy week 2. We'll see you next time.